G'day guys, welcome back to another Pink Panther video. We're going to do an AFL23 State of the Game tonight. So the game's been out for about a month and a half now, and I think it's an appropriate time to take a look at the good, the bad, and what's to come, just to give a bit more of a holistic view on everything, and we can take everything into account so people can make an informed decision on, whether they want to buy the game or what they want to do. So with that said, let's get stuck into it. So starting off with the launch, as we all know, the launch did not go to plan at all whatsoever. The game that came out at launch was by far and away worse than what we played as the submission build when we were in a big ant. So myself, Twisty and Kados. And you can tell that by the footage that we posted for the games that we played versus what was out on day one. It was miles and miles behind. So, I suppose what was said was that there was a day one patch that's sort of corrupted everything, all the modules and all the bolts and pieces that they had added on to make a complete game, which stripped it right back. How true that is, I suppose we'll never know. We're just going to take their word for it. But the ultimate end result was, for a consumer, the purpose of the game was not being met by any stretch of the imagination. You couldn't play it. It was literally unplayable in its launch state. And I think it caught a lot of people by surprise. And, especially when people are tipping in $100 for the game, or 89 if they were at, JB or EB, wherever it was, it wasn't a good enough initial drop by any stretch of the imagination. So wasn't a good start. But I suppose from there, Big Ants sort of, put their best foot forward to try and right the wrong. For the first couple of weeks, patches, we had, I think a patch a day for the first 2.5, 3 weeks to try and rebuild the game back up to what they believe was meant to launch on launch night. So a lot of gameplay tweaks, a lot of player movement tweaks, the goal shooting tweaks, marking animations, teleporting players. There was lots of bugs, I think it's fair to say, throughout that first 2 weeks, and the daily patches were required. So while it was good and very, very much appreciated, Big Ant went over and above to do the daily patches, because not many sort of dev companies do that. It was most definitely warranted and required, given the state of the game that had come out. So I think now, what are we at now? We're the 15th of June, and I play on Steam, so my Steam experience may be different to those who are playing on PlayStation. I know there's a bit of a variation on the patches that we're both on currently. In my personal view, the patch we're sitting on right now as of the 15th of June, for me, has been the most playable state the game's been in terms of ball movement, balance-wise, in terms of marking versus spoiling. I feel there's a reasonable balance there. The goal-kicking AI missing, I'm missing. There's probably still a little bit to learn and to understand about the goal-kicking mechanism, and I think they are bringing in some more changes to that again. So it's one of those ones to try and get your head around. But I personally would rather it the way it is now than everyone kicking 17 goals straight. To me, that didn't feel normal, didn't feel right, and it kind of just took the fun out of it. Even though it's frustrating when you hit the post from point-blank range and things like that, at some point in time, there comes an element of skill that it's on the user as well. But hopefully there's a bit more clarity on the kicking mechanism in the near future. But like I said, for me, patch-wise, I think at the moment we're in the most playable state that it's in. We are shifting now to weekly patches, so for PlayStation 5 in particular, and PS4. Steam might get one every 2 or 3 days, and the reason for that is the approval process. Well, it's a two-part thing. The approval process for Steam happens pretty quickly, so they can get the patches through almost instantaneous, like what we've seen in the last couple of weeks anyway. But more importantly, for PlayStation, if you put out a patch for PS5 and PS4 and something goes wrong within that patch, you can't actually undo it and roll it back, where you can do that on Steam. So there was an example last week where a patch went out on Steam after the game's in a really good gameplay state, and it made the game unplayable again. You couldn't mark, you couldn't do anything. And that was about to go live on PS5, and they had to sort of pull that out. So it didn't hit PS5, and then they stripped back the Steam version, and then went back and troubleshooted, started again, and then relaunched that patch the next week. So that's probably why there's been a lot more of a delay in PlayStation getting the most recent patches, because they had to go back and make sure that bug wasn't there, because it's even more work to go back and try and recode everything again to fix it, because you can't peel it off. Frustrating, but that's just to add some context for those who are wondering where their PS5 patch is. But I think it came through the other morning. So I'm keen to hear as well from you guys on PlayStation what you think of the state of the game currently on the most latest patch too. So make sure you drop a comment on that. Okay, so into some good parts of the game. So I'm talking about as of right now, because I think it's fair to say that there weren't many good parts, if any, from when it launched. But as of right now, as I said, the 15th of June is when this is being done. I think the marking and the spoiling is in a good spot. There has been stages throughout the game where marking was way overpowered, and then it went backwards and spoiling was way overpowered. I think now there is a bit more balance, which is an important part of the game to have. I like the kicking when being tackled. So there was a long period of time where the AI, as soon as they laid a hand on you, you were pretty much dispossessed and it was holding the ball. Like you couldn't actually squeeze a kick out. So the fact that they've delayed that a little bit and you can now get a kick away when being tackled, I think really, really helps with the flow of the game. Otherwise, it would just become too much of a tackle fest and stop-start. And to me, that's been the big thing, is not turning the game into a tackle fest, which is what we've kind of been used to with previous titles. And that's through no one's fault. AFL's a hard game to make, so I don't necessarily blame anyone for that. But I think the mechanisms that Big Ant have put in, where you can, squeeze out a little handball or a clearing kick as you're being dragged to the ground, I think have definitely helped keep the game a lot more open, which is good. But sometimes I feel like it's not as responsive as I would like it to be. But it's in an okay place. The goal kicking, like I said before, I think it's good, but it can be better. So, like I said, we're not kicking goals all the time, you're kicking points. I feel like that when you're in the forward 50 and it's a stoppage scenario, it would be good if you could get a quicker kick away, potentially. But other than that, it is good to see that you do have to use an element of skill now, as well as working out the natural, drift from left to right or right to left, and the player's ability as well. So, as I said before, there are, I believe, a few more things coming to the goal kicking piece that might make it a bit better, as in the shot meter being various speeds, so not just one constant speed, which will make it harder again to time it. So things like that will make it more difficult as well, which hopefully we will see soon. Handball chains, I think, have been good for the most part. This will also fall into the bad category as well, but there's definitely the ability to have link-up handball chains, which helps generate scoring opportunities, which is good. It's an important part of the game, and yeah, I feel like it's about 80% right at the moment. Tactics, so that tactics just come in recently. So I personally feel that you can tell the difference when you set tactics. So especially for your kick out, your huddle, or your overload left, overload right, man on man versus zone, you can definitely tell the difference. And from the center bounces as well, you can tell the difference as well with your attacking versus defensive versus balanced setup, and the forwards if they're playing high or low. So the tactics are responsive. And one thing I did find out the other day that Ross had posted, and I wasn't aware this was even doable, to be honest, but say if you play against Port Adelaide 5 times in a row, and you play your same style all 5 times, by the 3rd, 4th, and 5th time, the AI actually recognizes how you play, and they will play a different way to try and counter your gameplay. So that's why sometimes people have said, I've played this same team 4 times, I beat them by 10 goals the first time, then they beat me by 8 goals the last time. Why? And that's part of the reason. So you do have to change your own gameplay to try and outsmart the AI in some senses, which is really cool, and I didn't realize that was even a thing. So, but there you go. Unfortunately, there are still some bad pieces in here. Like I said before, the handballing for me, like I said, it's about 80% for me. I still feel like there's definitely times where the handball doesn't go in the intended direction. And I would be okay if the handball still went in the right direction, but maybe was off to the side. That would be acceptable for me because that's a real life variation. But I'm talking about when you've got someone running on the outside and you handball it, clearly aiming in that direction, and then it goes backwards over your head to an opponent. That's a game killer because it just hands the ball back straight to your opponent. They go inside 50. All your players are out of position. They mark and goal. So that's been a real big bugbear for me, not being able to execute the change perfectly. And I know it is a known issue at Big Ant, and it's something they are working on to get that corrected ASAP. Tackling, more so the free kick component, I think. On the large, I think tackling's been okay. I still think there's sometimes that you can, if you're running head on with another player, that sometimes if they get the ball first, you kind of just morph through them. You don't actually get the chance to tackle. And they just keep running on with it and kick it long. So I'd like to see the tackle piece amended a bit more. But I will say it has improved dramatically in the centre bounce, which is a good thing. But the other thing I've noticed is I tend to feel like I don't get rewarded with a lot of holding the ball free kicks against the AI, despite them having sufficient opportunity to get rid of it. And on the flip side, when they tackle me, it's holding the ball almost all the time, which I'm okay with because most of the times it is a valid decision. But I just feel like it's not getting paid the other way, which is slightly annoying. The online gameplay, I'm a massive online gamer. I pretty much would, play that mode more often than not on most video games. Haven't been able to on AFL as yet because it is just not up to the same standard as the management mode, unfortunately. And again, it's a known issue, and I'm a bit bummed that it's taken this long for it to get right because it's just sitting there and it's not really functional in any sense of the word because the glitches in there are far more prevalent. Like when you take a specky and you hit the ground, it's called plan automatically, so your opponent just tackles you. I'm sure we all had the bug where the ball would stay on the ground. You couldn't pick it up for the rest of the quarter, so you're playing soccer. Just the handballs and the tackling is a lot more clunky as well. So I know there has been a couple of the last patches have had gameplay improvements in there for online, but it's still a way to go in my books, and that's something they've got to really focus on because it's an important part to gaming to be able to play online. On the same kind of theme with online gaming, obviously you can play multiplayer 2v2, but you've got to have two remote players versus two remote players. I'm not a big fan of that personally. I really think it needs to get to a stage where it's 2v2, but all four are remote players because I just don't think in this day and age that people are going to their mate's house all that often to play 2v2. I just think with everyone's got work and school and family and things like that, their own sporting stuff that they do, that time doesn't necessarily permit. And it's for me, it's more about coming home after work, being able to just sit down, text a mate and say, "I do want to jump online and play each other or play against their other mates," and you sort of can't do that currently, which is a little bit annoying. So hopefully that gets fixed down the line. And there's still some obvious little bugs with like teleporting. I haven't found the stuck in the mud one too prevalent for me personally, but I know some people have spoken about it. But I mean, all you got to do though, guys, if you do see these bugs, please make sure you report it to the Big Ant support site because ultimately, if we don't report them and don't flag them, they're probably going to not get fixed, if that makes sense. So make sure you do report it. The where to. So there's still a lot of questions about the game and where it's going and what's coming next. So for me, the biggest next piece for me has to be management mode. And this kind of falls into the bad piece as well. So it kind of overlaps a bit. But as it stands right now, there isn't really much reason to keep going back to keep playing the game. There's no depth in any of the modes whatsoever, which is an absolute killer. Because the gameplay is I think at a quite okay standard. There's still room to go, but you can't draft. Well, you can draft players, but you can't grow your players. You can't train them. You can't sign delisted free agents. The trades don't work properly. So all of those main core features that you would expect in a management game, and that we were told, and will be in there, I believe, aren't in there yet, and it's a big missing piece of the puzzle. Now, I believe, in my expectation would be that the management piece will hopefully be rectified in 2 weeks tops. I reckon they've got to get that knocked on the head pretty quickly because I think people are looking to go further in the game, but it's great to win a premiership, but when you can't grow your player, like, for those who have watched my streams, you'll know that I've drafted the big 202 centimetre full forward, who's about a 67 overall, and I love him, want to play him, but I can't develop and grow him, so he's still, as bad as he was the day I picked him up. And I think that's a big piece of the puzzle that's missing, so that hopefully is next on the list. Xbox is obviously the other piece that everyone's wanting to know more about. I believe there's meant to be an announcement this week based on the tweet from Big Ants last week that we should hear something soon. I suppose that the word on the street from retailers is they're saying the 30th of June. I don't know if that's a placeholder date or if that's a real date they've been told, but essentially, from what I can understand, we're waiting for Microsoft to give the green light to pull the trigger on communication, number one, and the physical release of the game. So the sooner they can do that, the better. I think there's a little, just this is my opinion, there's a little bit of an element, I believe, of the AFL game being a bit of a small fry for Microsoft in comparison to everything else they're dealing with. So I feel like there's probably times where it's been pushed to the back of the line. as I said, purely my opinion, but it would make sense on the surface given that the market's, Australian based mainly. But yeah, hopefully we get the green light on that soon. Pro Team. Pro Team's the other mode that obviously we were obviously told is going to be coming. I think I can hit on the head pretty convincingly that it is definitely coming this year. It is not going to be delayed for a year. I think that was speculated somewhere. My best guess is going to be early to mid-July that we will see Pro Team. Not necessarily the same time as Xbox. Xbox may come first and Pro Team may come after, or vice versa. Just, I don't know when Xbox is launching. But for all intents and purposes, Pro Team is there ready to go as a mode. They've got the legends and everything in there. The biggest problem is the online gameplay isn't up to scratch. So that's why they've got to get that, in a really, really good spot, because there is no way you could launch Pro Team with how good they want it to be in the current online state. So that's where I think we're going to see a lot more patches in the near future aimed at online play. And we obviously can't play that yet until all platforms are on the same patch number as well, because of that, there's no cross-platform available currently. So that's the other piece that has to happen soon. So hopefully everyone is aligned very shortly. But they're probably the big ticket items in regards to AFL. Hopefully we get all this stuff soon. I'm hoping these weekly patches are a lot more chunkier. And like I said, management mode needs to be the next big thing so we can actually play it properly. Fix the bug on the custom season as well, so we can, play our custom teams and not worry about the crashing. And there'll be some other little bits and pieces along the way. Like I know people want to edit stats and do things like that. I'm sure there'll be ongoing conversations that whether they decide to do it or not, I'm not too sure. But if you've got ideas and you've got good suggestions, Big Ant have always been open to people suggesting them. And there's been a lot of people who have made suggestions, whether it's on Big Footy, on my stream, like not me, but as just general viewers on my stream commenting to Ross, on their Twitter, whatever it might be. And they're happy to take all ideas on board if they're good. So if you've got a good idea or a way to change or improve things, don't be afraid to flag it with them, because you never know, you could be responsible for a really good change in the game. So don't be afraid to sing out. And finally, I suppose the $1 million question for those who don't have the game yet is, would I recommend buying it in its current state? I think the answer has to be no at the moment. And I say that purely because of the no depth reason. If you want to play it just for play now to get used to the game, that's fine. It's in a more than playable state and you'll have fun doing so. But if you want to buy the game, which most people would want to do, to be able to deep dive into management mode, grow your players, do all that kind of stuff, play online with your mates, it's just not there yet. And hopefully it will be, though, in a couple of weeks. So there's a bit of a state of the play with AFL23, the good, bad, and the ugly. I think stick with it. I think, they're putting out as much as they can. I just want to see this, those last few bits of the chunky pieces come through a little bit quicker so we can start getting stuck into management, because I'll be starting a brand new management career the moment everything's there, and getting into online as well. So if you like the video, make sure you subscribe. Please let me know in the comments how you're going with your AFL23 experience. I know that there's been varying, I suppose, views across PlayStation 4 to PS5 to Steam. So hopefully, everyone's having a much better experience with these most recent patches. But yeah, very keen to see how you're all going with the game. But until next time, I'll see you on the stream on the Pink Panthers, and catch you then.